Hey, I hope you are having a good day. I invite you to have coffee with me. We're going to have a bit of a change of plans because the gal that was going to join me has a 4-year-old that is very sick. And so she's unavailable right now. And I don't know if you can identify, but I have heard a lot of people share that they have had either illness themselves or have had sick kids. So if you're in that space, my heart goes out to you. It is the season. And I know in the last days, weeks, things are going down. There is a reason I decided to put together a podcast episode especially dedicated to homeschool moms that are feeling stressed right now, because there's just all sorts of different things. I myself have experienced some pretty crazy stuff, which I'll talk about in the Facebook group as well. But what I wanted to do is, because originally we were planning to be here and we were going to streamline your homeschool day and your homeschool routines and your life routines, your mom routines. And so I would love to hear, is there an area where you would like to focus on? Because if you share in the comments below, hey Whitney, if you share in the comments below something that you'd like to work on, then I can help, especially to address that. I know that every time I go live, when there's a conversation about streamlining anything, people love this stuff. And I take it for granted. Reality is I take it for granted because it comes by easily for me after this many years. But it took an awful lot of practice to whittle away the things that didn't matter. And to recognize that there's certain things that I was investing time in that really wasn't that important. And it usually revolved around what other people thought I was supposed to do, what I thought other people thought was important, therefore probably I should find important as well, except I didn't. And it just felt like one more thing to add to my list or add to my curriculum plan or, add to my day. So when I learn how to deal with boundaries and I learn how to engage relationships in a way that is authentic and also really helps to show up, or where I show up authentically, and I also am engaging the other person to provide what they need authentically, then I discover there's a whole bunch of things that we think we need to do for each other and for other people, and we don't. So that principle plays a big part into the discussion that I have to have today. I'm going to be a little slower, by the way, because yesterday I took a fall in the evening, and I know that I'm not on the top of my game today, but that's okay because this is real life, and real life apparently is happening everywhere for everybody. And if that's you, then my heart is with you. So before we get started, is there something specific that you want to streamline in your homeschool? I'll just check the comments if there is anything. Okay. I'll keep looking back to see if there is. The first thing that I repeat almost as a mantra when I'm engaging other homeschool moms is to ask the first question. If you're a homeschool mom, it's a different experience than being a mom because you have this added role of this educational component, and it's super important for all of us to do it in a way that feels genuine to our values, but also useful for our kids. And so that's why I often ask the question, what do you believe in education to be anyway? If you get really clear on what you believe it is you're doing in your homeschool, who you're raising up, then you start to get a little clearer on how you're doing things, the resources or tools you're using, how you're spending your time actually helping your kids learn certain things. And then you realize there's certain things you're doing that maybe other people are doing too, but maybe you don't need to do them. Does it really serve the child right in front of you? And I would suggest that you're not just dealing with the child in front of you. You're also dealing with your own inner child, the person that when she, he, whoever grew up and was educated in a specific way, there was a certain way that you learned and a certain way you didn't. And there were certain ways that people were engaging you in learning that were useful and certain ways that weren't. You learned to have a natural default in how you engage learning. And you have to take that into significance in your homeschool if you want to do things with ease, that is. So you want to engage your kids or you want to engage the educational component, the focused educational component with your kids in a way that actually is useful to your specific child, but also addressing your own inner child and how you learn and your biases and your challenges and how you learn. So both of those need to be considered. So the first thing I always ask is, what do you believe in education to be anyway? So what could you delete? If the things that other people are doing don't really fit with what you believe in education to be, then delete it. Just let it go. Or at least try to let it go for a month. Put a little moment on your day timer that says, okay, let's check back in with this curriculum. Should we include the Rod and Staff curriculum? Should we let it go? Discussion I had yesterday with someone. So you decide, but you can create an experiment around it. It doesn't have to be permanent, whatever decision you make. One thing, another conversation point that I take for granted, it is how to organize your home learning space. You could just have a kitchen table, of course. If you have a little bit older kids, they probably just want to hang out on the bed anyways, and their own bed with a cat and maybe a cup of tea and do their studies independently. But how do you organize your learning space? That very much depends on your natural sensibilities. I have a homeschool room still filled with resources that I am slowly whittling because I am selling them. And if you're local, let me know because I've got a lot. And this is actually a home that we built. And so I designed the specific space that I created as a homeschool room, and it's a beautiful room. However, it's a beautiful room that I did not always use for homeschooling, as you can imagine. It became like a storage space and also a space where we would do geography because we had a map on the wall. But I know many moms that have maps on the wall in their kitchens or in their family rooms, and that works too. It isn't a requirement to have a homeschool room or a homeschool desk or any of those things. But if you want them, why not? If you have the ability to afford it and it actually has value to you, then you go, girl. You do it your way, whatever works for you and makes you feel like you're really embodying the space. And that's, I think, the key is to really ask yourself, does this space reflect how we use it? And am I able to close the door on it at the end of the day or take everything off the table so I can eat a meal at this table? Is there a place that actually feels like it can be open and closed so I don't always have to see the mess, but it's always easily accessible? We all have different priorities when it comes to cleaning and tidiness. And so if it is a challenge for you, perhaps baskets. That was something that we incorporated, is everybody had their separate baskets with their different either workbooks or different read alouds or whatever they were doing, craft activities or science things, and they would have their own different baskets. When they were teenagers, they would tend to bring that up to their rooms at the designated learning time that we had, the more formal time. I know that when you get really clear on your values, on what's important for you in your homeschool, and also what's important for you here, what are your personal values? If you compare the activities you do in your real life with the things that you're actually doing on your day timer, you will discover that you can cull or delete a whole bunch of activities and a whole bunch of curriculum because it just doesn't align with how you really see the world. So it's valuable to start from a values place and ask yourself, what do I really believe? What's really important to me? And does whatever this content of this book or resource really serve the bigger picture? So Whitney, you said, I want my kids to learn math, but we spend so much time there with 4 kids. So much time doing math, you mean? I love our curriculum, but spending so much time on math is not exactly leaving time for other things. Yes. Okay, so here's my straight up response when it comes to math. It's not my strong suit, by the way. I chose curriculum, a formal approach to math, I think primarily for me, because I wasn't confident. So I didn't know, would we be missing something that was super important? Obviously, math typically builds on itself. So you need to have different skills that build on each other. You can't figure out subtraction unless you've already figured out addition. That's what I mean by building on it. And yet, out of four of my kids, three of them were very math strong. They were very natural at it. And I learned that we were using the resources that I'd long purchased, which by the way are now for sale, Math You See, and it was a very useful program for me so that I would understand where we were at. But my three of my four kids really didn't need it. I noticed over the course of time that until about the grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, somewhere between probably grade 8, I could tell that based on that math curriculum, the majority of the skills that were taught were very easy to understand quickly if the child was ready. And much of it could be actually understood, or you could actually learn the concepts probably within 6 to 9 months, all of them very quickly. And most of them you're going to be learning at some point in real life, like some of the basic ones. No one in all of human history is going to give our children or our grown-up children a few pages of math equations to fill out. They will not come by that stuff in that form unless they are going into a math university degree or have to take something for some degree. But they're not going to be getting a page of math equations when they're all grown up. And everything is contextual. A lot of the math concepts we really do learn naturally. And so I actually don't think we really need to have things segregated in year to year. I don't really think you have to have one skill learned before you move into the next one. And sometimes you can jump in and actually have something accomplished, like actually help a child understand a few concepts altogether. There's just, every child is different. Kids learn differently. I know that it feels really comfortable to sequentially move through all of those topics. Especially if you've purchased one curriculum, to move through it as though you're just moving through a book and just like you're reading word for word in a novel. It feels comfortable. It makes you feel like you're doing things right. But just as you're experiencing, Whitney, it takes a lot of time when you approach it that way. And if you are approaching math concepts in more of a holistic approach, you'll discover that you're always using math, and also that you can incorporate general math concepts or conceptual learning in your day-to-day life. Now that, I think we could have a conversation about this in more depth, and you can certainly ask me more questions about that in the support group when we have support group. I don't know if you're coming on Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, you said I've grasped that in truth, or that truth in other areas, but been slow to do so in math. Yes, I know, me too. And I really am not strong. I'm really not strong. I've said this a few times and people think that I'm exaggerating, but because it sounds so hard to believe, but it's not actually untrue that I learned double-digit subtraction when I was homeschooling. I didn't understand why we were carrying I can't even think of the word, crossing out numbers and then putting a 9 at the top, or why there were zeros being carried. I didn't understand what the point of that was until I took Steve Demi's Math You See program. I think it was like the beta program of Decimal Street. He has this concept around Decimal Street. And so anyways, if you know Math You See, this will be relevant. If you don't, it won't. Very simple concept. It just means that there's like 9 units in one house, or there's 9, 9, whatever. I can't actually think. I think that I'm undervaluing how much I was challenged yesterday when I felt. But anyways, I do know that these concepts sometimes are more challenging for us because we've been challenged by it. And it's not that including math concepts is truly a challenge to do with our kids. It's that we want to make sure we're not missing something, or we're not sure we actually understood something, so we don't want to disadvantage our kids, which is, it's sensible then to follow a curriculum. It does make sense. But I've learned, say, another thought was that I learned it wasn't necessary for me to always check every single thing that my child did in the workbook every single day. That sometimes I could circle back in a few days and just check to see, okay, is what they're doing making sense? In the beginning, I checked absolutely everything. There were seasons also that I was missing some things, and I should have been spending more time focusing on a few of the details so that things weren't missed. But I remember very early on, and this probably especially applies with you, Whitney, in conversations that we've had, but I remember my oldest having, or at least somebody had referred to some concept about sensory processing challenges, but they didn't call it that then because this is a new concept. It's something that's newer in these days. And so back in the day, I don't remember what they called it, but I remember noticing that she was really having struggles to understand certain things. And, it took everything in me in the very early parenting days. This is true. I'm not proud of it, but it is true, to not personalize things and see it as somehow she was just countering me for the sake of countering me. And I didn't understand that she was actually not understanding everything, and that she really was overwhelmed by too much content, too much going on. And that she just wasn't going to take it all in at that moment. So what I learned to do over the course of time, out of necessity, was to not do as much. But I remember going to a conference and someone speaking to these sensory processing challenges and saying these kids aren't able to absorb it like you think they are. So your goal is to give them teeny tiny little bites of things, and then watch at the end of the week, how are they doing? Or at the end of a month, whatever. It doesn't matter what the timeline is. Just circle back at some point and check to see how are they doing. And I remember this person saying that 15 minutes is all you need, just 15 minutes. So, I don't know your specific scenario, how your kids engage in concepts that might challenge them. But I don't know about you. Like right now, I'm actually doing something that's quite challenging. I know I have a mild concussion and I'm still showing up on Instagram Live, which y'all should know. This is definitely who I am. I will get through certain things. I had to have a few naps this morning already in order to show up here. But I know that my brain is not firing on all cylinders. So I'm not going to be able to do things as quickly as I could otherwise. And so I know that, same thing with my kids, that they are just not always able to take in everything as quickly. If our goal is to make sure that we've checked off the boxes at the end of the day, we will probably be very unhappy for a lot of our homeschool days. So I would suggest that the goal is just to add little bite-sized chunks of things that are relevant. And then just to say, that's it. That's all we're going to do today. And then we're going to move on and see what happens tomorrow. There's a really good book called Learning How to Learn by, not going to remember the name, Barbara something. I'll get the name. It's on my Homeschool Mama reading list. And it really explains how kids' brains typically learn. Every brain's different. So it typically teaches how kids learn or humans learn, and it isn't in giant chunks. And we know that because we went to school, and very few of us, even the most academic of us, didn't take in giant chunks of things and remember everything all at once or have it absorbed after the test. So our goal is to do little tiny chunks. If we're not enjoying our homeschool days, what's the point? Just put them back in school. We can all be miserable in a different way. Just enjoy your day. That's obviously coming from my perspective, a value of fun and joy and play. But that was actually learned for me. I learned that I needed to do that because these days are actually going to end. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to make sure that I check off the boxes, or am I doing this because this really is serving the child right in front of me? And my little girl also is enjoying her time with her little girl. You want to focus in a direction that serves everyone. So yes, you're giving them skills in whatever topic, like maybe math concepts, or maybe you're also able to spend good solid time with your kids and enjoy it. Therefore, you can include all the core subjects if you want to, without having to officially write on your day timer, science, history, like I did for a long time. You could just say, let's do a read aloud, and look for the different core subjects in the read aloud. Or you could look for the core subjects in your homeschool day to reassure yourself that you are actually, or your children really are learning various things. A way to lean into child-led learning there anyways. Let me see. I'm so glad you're otherwise okay. Yes, thank you. It's been a day. And I know it has for a lot of other people. So it's been really huge. I have many things that I would share with you in streamlining your homeschool day. One of the biggest things really is what my last day's experience has been, is to really lean into flexibility. If you have a fairly consistent routine, whatever that means for you, and whatever it is that you value, if you're typically doing that thing on a regular basis, I guarantee you are going to have learned a ton yourself, and so will your children. I have noticed that over the course of time, that when you can do something for 15 minutes a day, whether it's building a business, or whether it's writing a book, or whether it's helping your child learn something related to a math concept or anything whatsoever, you can do a lot. And also, if you have that routine and you are accustomed to typically going into that routine regularly, then you can be flexible, then you can take time away. Then you can say, you know what, it's okay. It didn't work today. Today wasn't the right day. And then because you've already been doing it for so long and you're going to continue to do it in that way, then you know it's okay. It didn't have to happen today, but you've done a ton. This is also why when I talk about streamlining your routine, even though I was primarily unschooled in how I approach things for the majority of my homeschool years, I still think it's super valuable to write what you do down, to put it somewhere. And it doesn't have to be detail, like full details. It can be. I know I did go on that side. I did. But when you write it down, say once a week, write down generally what you're doing, or collect the things that your kids write or draw on, or the books they read, or whatever it is that you're doing with them. When you collect all of those things at the end of a week, you write down what so-and-so did. And, you know, if you're familiar with including things in core subject areas, you could discover, like I have, that you are doing so much and you're offering your kids so many cool learning opportunities in all the different subject areas. When you look at it at the end of a year, you just will lean into child-led learning more and more and more every year, to the point where you'll be like me, talking at a public setting about deschooling and child-led learning and wondering why people are getting weird around you because they're like, what is she talking about? Could not be. Is that person? And she's talking about deschooling? What does that mean? She's anti-schooling? No, that's not what I said. But you actually do look kind of weird to other people. Because, and that's maybe not your goal, it wasn't my goal per se, but I've discovered that I'm so off the beaten path, I don't even know that I'm seen as off the beaten path. All I know is that this is the benefit. I'm happier doing the homeschool. My kids are happier homeschooling. It's working for us. And now that my kids are, well, not all my kids, but almost all my kids are grown, all of them, all four of them are very independent-minded, differently. They very much are intentional about how they're doing life in their unique ways. They're doing things they want to be doing. and so am I. And I think those things are the most important things, that you're living your life on purpose, that it's clear to you what your values are and that they are actually manifesting in your life right now, and you're happy doing it. And, if you haven't heard me say this before, this wasn't me in the first 4 years. The first 4 years, I had a plan, and get out of the way, kids, or at least come alongside me, come behind me, let's do it, because we're doing it. And I quickly learned that won't work. I mean, actually it will work for the one child you have that's compliant. But if you have another child that was, the other kids that are not compliant, or the ones that kind of like a little passive aggressive about how they engage things, or maybe they just full on say, I really don't want to do this. Or frankly, you also at the end of the day realize you're overwhelmed, then you discover that it didn't work. So what was the point? And that was most definitely my experience. That is quite literally the reason why I wrote my book and why I even began formally homeschool coaching, although I was always homeschool coaching at some point, but formally homeschool coaching the last 4 years, is this discussion about overwhelm. You've probably heard me say this before, but there was a moment when I was traveling with my family. We did a lot of that for the first 7 homeschool years. And I remember a morning where we didn't live in the town that we were traveling in, but I remember seeing a yellow school bus drive past one day. And so I knew it was going to show up the next day at about the same time. And I remember thinking, I got to get my kids on that bus because I am done with this. It feels beyond overwhelming. I feel super stressed. And I don't know if you can imagine this. Can I hear an amen? I know you can, because I talk with homeschool moms all the time. But for me, in that morning, I don't remember the specific scenario. I just remember that I remember feeling really frustrated and feeling like, why can't we just do this beautiful thing that I've planned for all of us to do? I put a lot of effort into it. I've done a lot of research. I've been on Pinterest all of last week trying to create these cool unit studies, and people are not nearly as motivated as I am. And I can remember there being bickering, like kids upset with each other or irritated with each other. I can't remember the context, but 4 kids, me with my intentional plans, and people didn't want to work together. And I remember just going, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore. And I know that maybe you're not the one that has thought that, but I know that there's a lot of people that have been there. That was a breaking point for me. At the same morning, I had a friend tell me, you should really watch this Brené Brown TEDx talk. And it was about vulnerability and authenticity, and how when we lean into that, we're more likely to address our real needs. And I just remember thinking somehow that really tied with the morning. And I still to this day have watched that video again and can't quite figure out what was it I heard. Except I remember this emotional memory, and it was this: I have no idea who I am or what I need, and yet I'm trying to make this thing happen in my homeschool. I'm not happy doing it the way I'm doing it. Things have to change. Things have to stop. And then somewhere I came across a book in that same town by John Holt, How Children Fail. A dry book, but a really useful book. So he's a long-term educator who is now passed, but he was probably for 30-some years working in schools. And so he was recounting in this book how kids were learning in his classroom, math concepts, not coincidentally, and how they weren't learning and how they weren't absorbing it and how they weren't able to return, to regurgitate the information that he'd given last week. And he was in awe and shock that they weren't getting it. And at the end of that book, I was sold on the concept of unschooling. And I remember bringing my oldest daughter to a Starbucks and sitting her down and saying, that is it. We will never homeschool again. We will be doing things very unschooled, is how I spoke to it at that time. And that lasted for 6 months, by the way. But that is very much how, that I moved into overcoming my overwhelm, is the 3 things that I talk about in the Overwhelm Group Coaching Program. The first thing is actually addressing your needs. It's not a requirement, or it's not an option, it's a requirement. The second thing is to address the relationships that you have and what the challenges are. And the third thing is how you're framing your homeschool, how you're seeing your homeschool, like this discussion about streamlining your homeschool, or really looking at it and saying, what do I want for my kids in my homeschool? Those three elements are the things that helped me not be overwhelmed. And it didn't take 5 weeks. Like my overcoming overwhelm group coaching program is a 5-week program. It took me years to figure out the things that I share with you. And not coincidentally, yesterday I released an episode on taming the stress dragon, the 23 ways you can tame the stress dragon as a homeschool mom. And those were all like 2 decades worth of learning for me. And they are continued lessons that I incorporate into my life in the last 24 hours. But all of the things, whether it's self-compassion techniques, learning to relate to ourselves, building boundaries, and relating to others in a way that serves them and ourselves, whether it's learning how to relate to the concept of what an education is and how to actually incorporate it in our homeschool or in our homeschool family lives in a way that feels satisfying, or also, what's the other one? Relating to ourselves, others, and to our homeschool lives. Yeah, those three are the things that really help to shift me away from those overwhelmed moments, the stressed moments, the frustrating moments. I think I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to say, all of the things that I spoke to today, I could speak endlessly on streamlining your homeschool and deleting things and also leaning into the things that matter. Also, I'm going to go take a little brief nap, and then I'm going to jump into the Facebook group, and I'm going to be the Homeschool Mama support group on Facebook. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about those 23 strategies to tame the homeschool mom stress dragon. If you're interested in the Overcoming Overwhelm group coaching program, send me a message and I'll send you more details about that. I hope your day was a lot less eventful than mine. And maybe in a week or so, you should send me over some peanut M&Ms, because I did not see a single peanut M&M last night. And since my 15-year-old son is not interested in Halloweening or trick-or-treating anymore, I tried to check out the grocery store and apparently they're sold out. But I don't think I need that today. I hope it was a fun day. And we'll see you over in the Facebook group soon. We'll talk to you soon.